of a short story called Stingers. If you saw me, I was standing beside my car, pulled off the road onto a grassy easement on the other side of the bike lane. I was moving erratically, yelling, running around the car, peering into it, but from a distance. All four doors were flung open. I believe I had the presence of mind to hit the flashers, so everything was blinking, strobing distress. In a house around the corner, my mother was sleeping through the last few hours of her life, held fast to the bed by a morphine blanket. "Can you give her more?" my sister Ruth asked when she called. The hospice nurse shrugged, said protocol would not prohibit a bigger dose if we weren't worried about it. She confused me by offering worry as a way to feel. If you saw me by the side of the road, I want you to know there was a hornet in my car. A fat, red, buzzing, dull thumping, the hard shell of its body striking windows, windshield. 2 weeks ago, we had worried about immigration authorities. Marjorie, our mother, still had a telephone in her room, a landline. I yanked it out of the wall myself, or the housekeeper did, but I told her to do it, or I approved of it afterward. I explained it to Marjorie, though I didn't call her Marjorie when I spoke to her, as though I couldn't make them put it back. I begged them not to let her use the phone in the other part of the house, but she was old and sick, and she looked pitiful when she sat in her wheelchair. Or maybe I didn't bring it up. I probably didn't bring up the phone since no serious work had been done. She simply didn't need to make more calls because I was there every day, or Ruth was there every day, or we both were. She could say whatever she liked to our faces. Marjorie was always asking for our other sister, Sharon, but Sharon was living in Florida, or traveling through Georgia, or one of the Carolinas. There were a series of places she could be in, so a phone wouldn't help. How would anyone know what number to call? Ruth was here, and I was, and the man whose job it was to lift her out of her wheelchair and carry off the waste from her bedside commode was from Utah, so he could not be deported once he had proven where he was from, and eventually nothing serious happened, though Marjorie's call had brought a marked band and a pair of bored-looking agents to the house. They really do wear aviator sunshades. The house manager and circuit nurse both insisted we come every day now instead of twice a week, so there was no more need of a telephone. I used my cell phone to call Ruth before I sped away from the last day I went to sit with Marjorie. Then I found a hornet in my car. I pulled over so fast, so recklessly, I nearly hit the silver pole of a no parking sign. I didn't worry about no parking though because the sign meant on the street and I was in the green. I knew this street well. I found the cutaway without thinking about it. I passed by it every day. She didn't talk for the last 3 days, but grew sleepier over each one as it passed until she only slept. The staff and the nurse all told us it was better if she didn't wake up. Did you know that? If you fall into a deep or overly long sleep just on the edge of life, you will not be allowed to retreat from oblivion by waking. The nurse said, "You don't want them to wake up because they talk incoherently or thrash around, and everybody gets upset. They're in pain, and also parts of the brain die before the body does." I was only asking about my mother, but the dead antecede a crowded pronoun. My sister said, "More drugs? Ma would love that." True enough. There was precedent. When I was dead and had pneumonia, she took me to the emergency room one night where she told them I was having seizures. I whispered to her secretively when the doctor was out of the room, "Mom, I'm not having seizures." Well, if you had seizures, you'd be out of your head, so how would you know? For all you know, you did. For 5 years in 3 different towns as we moved from place to place, she had my prescription for phenobarbital refilled every time she could afford it. This was before she discovered oxycodone. "Load her up," the guy from Utah said. "It's kinder, but not an account of our feeling." Ruth asked again, "Is she still asleep? Can she have more?" I told them to give her every drop allowed, and unaware of the hornet, I got in my car to leave as soon as Ruth said she was on her way. We had been taking turns. My sister went at night, and I sat by Marjorie during the day. I talked to her about the weather, about her grandkids and football, politics, anything. The week before she fell asleep, she could still pick what to talk about, mostly a matter of memory. Yes, I remember when I was 11 and went to be baptized in the green Swiss dotted dress made for me from a McCall's pattern on top and a Butterick's pattern on the bottom because my hips were too skinny for McCall's. I gave everyone such a hard time about eating. Also, should I remind her now how when I was 12, After my father had died rather suddenly and my sisters had moved away, she left for 6 weeks, giving me instructions to stay indoors and ration my food. She went to Laughlin and learned to play blackjack. And when she came back, she felt very guilty, so she quit her job and surrendered for the missions, though she never actually went because she worried about how she would get her hair colored if she were sent to the field in some remote village of South America. Did she remember when we learned about coloring our hair? It was after she shut the trunk lid on the back of Ruth's head. She said, "Ruth, look in there," and pointed into the car trunk. Ruth said she didn't see anything. So Marjorie said, "Bend lower, look harder," and then she shut the trunk. But I don't think she intended the latch to hit Ruth in the back of the skull, or else she intended to kill her. Ruth slept for a week then without drugs. When her hair grew back in, it flowed snow white from a dollar-sized scar in the back of the middle of her head. Marjorie bought Ruth a box of Miss Clairol and one for herself. "You girls worry too much. That's why you're going gray so young. Now, I'm supposed to have a few gray hairs at my age, but it's my pleasure to lose them." They dyed their hair the same shade of brown, and they both looked beautiful. And while we were remembering moments of beauty and question, should I take her back to the afternoon our father broke Sharon's front teeth, and afterwards she couldn't play trombone in the middle school band anymore? Marjorie told her it was an answer to a prayer because the sound drove everybody crazy anyway. Naturally, this is not at all what I said. When I had the chance, I didn't say more than, "Yes, butter makes good bottoms, but I've always liked McCall's tops." She had been just about to fall asleep. I want to keep this straight, but it gets confusing what happened when. It was the last day when I ended up in the road screaming at the hornet, "Get out, get out!" The fear of getting stung is such a wild cause. When we talked about patterns, Marjorie had been just on the edge of sleep, not the last sleep, but a simple sleep, the last sleep being still another 3 or 4 days away, though I could see it coming, showing up at the door, wearing aviator shades, asking for my mother by name. She also might have perceived its arrival out of the corner of her eye. She might have been thinking, "Close, it's close." She said, "Remember when you got so sick in Lubbock, or was it Odessa?" I don't think I was well in either place. She asked for some water, drank it with difficulty. I wanted to look somewhere else while the water dribbled down her chin and she fought with swallowing because her esophagus was constricted or because her muscles were too weak to push the water over the back of her tongue. The struggle looks the same. But I had to hold the cup steady. I had to watch her until she finished. When she'd fought down an ounce or 2 of water, she said, "I've always been so alive before this. Remember when you got sick with your lungs and your kidneys in Lubbock?" Her voice was high, whistling. "Yes." "It might have been Odessa. I took you to the emergency room." "Yes, you did." "I sat on the foot of your bed and told you how I'd rather be the one to have that sickness if I could." "Yes. And then you took the medicine they gave me for the seizures you told them I was having." No, I didn't really say that, of course. I said I'd kill myself that minute if you could feel better. I remember wishing you wouldn't talk like that. Then she said, "I was wrong. Right now, I wish you could be the one doing this." "I always thought I'd die for you kids, if I could, but I changed my mind." She got drowsy then. Sleep only deepened her look of surprise. This was days before you saw me standing by the road, pulled over on the side, up onto the grassy green belt. When I was with her, I sat on the foot of her bed or on a chair beside her bed. After she fell asleep and it was clear there wouldn't be any more talking, sometimes I walked around the room. I always went into the kitchen to use the phone in case she could hear me. I don't know who I'm talking to, but if it's you, get out of my car. Before I left on the last day, I signed for the extra meds because the last thing she needed was to wake up and start jerking her arms and legs around. The ordeal with the hornet happened on the way home. I found the whole thing strange and terrible, though I waited for Ruth to call that night and say Marjorie was dead before I cried and then fell asleep myself.